Science Meets Nature podcast, a place where we explore the power of nature through the lens of science. So, what if I told you there's a medical condition out there where your immune system works so well that it's actually trying to unalive you? I know that sounds crazy, right? But it's true. This is called an autoimmune disease. There's more than 80 of them currently known, and it affects tens of millions of people all over the world. So technically, an autoimmune disease is a condition where the immune system will mistakenly attack the body's own cells, tissues, and organs. So I want you to visualize a place in the future where you have a bunch of robot sentries that are patrolling everything. And the robot sentries only attack intruders. However, one day there's a glitch in their programming, and now all of a sudden these robot sentries are attacking both the inhabitants and the intruders because they just can't differentiate between the two. This is essentially what an autoimmune system disorder is. So in this episode, I'd like to talk about some of the history of autoimmune disorders, maybe some potential causes. They're not really sure what causes them, but some potential causes other than genetic. We're going to talk about some common conditions, and then of course we're going to cover some natural solutions or some natural ways to support your health through this process. So historically, autoimmune diseases have been around forever. They've been known. You have your type 1 diabetes and your rheumatoid arthritis. All of these are considered autoimmune disorders. And typically speaking, you didn't have autoimmune disorders unless there was some sort of genetic issues. Oftentimes, royal families, because they were so closely interbred, they oftentimes would have autoimmune diseases and other types of deformities. This also happened in rural areas where there was no DNA diversity. So you have to have a specific range of DNA in order to avoid birth defects and other types of issues. So there really wasn't a spike in known autoimmune disorders until around the 1950s. That was like the first spike. That's when they first started diagnosing it. And there's been a lot of argument about it, like, oh, well, that's just because we had poor diagnostics back then. No, they had the diagnostics, they had the symptoms, and they pretty much diagnosed the very same way today. They have a checklist, and if you meet the certain criteria on the checklist, then, they think you might have that particular disorder. So in the 1950s, it kind of started to spike, and then again in like the 1980s, it started to spike, and there were various things that have happened culturally with us that have seemed to correlate with the timing on the rise of certain diseases. So I might have actually misspoke a little earlier. Maybe it wasn't the 1950s. It was probably closer to around the 1940s, and there were specific things that we did, not necessarily culturally, but more on a scientific level. These are things that affected culture overall that we did that seems to correlate with the rise and spikes in the rise of autoimmune diseases. So, for instance, back in the 1940s, this is when we first introduced DDT. This was a pretty toxic pesticide. You may have heard about it. They still use it in other parts of the world, but it's been banned from use here in the United States. Now, it seemed it had an direct impact on the environment, like it was making birds' eggs didn't have the hard shell. They were softening the eggs, and birds were dying. This is why one of the reasons why the bald eagle was endangered was simply because you had the DDT entered in the environment. Well, this also seems to correlate with a spike in the rise of specific autoimmune diseases. So you're talking like your multiple sclerosis and your fibromyalgia. Even though it wasn't necessarily technically considered an autoimmune disease, it is kind of more classified as an autoimmune disease that attacks the nervous system now. So it does have some relevance or some prevalent information in regards to showing that DDT actually impacted, or at least could have potentially had an impact on the rise of autoimmune diseases. And then, of course, right around the same time, we developed antibiotics. Now, to be fair, antibiotics were a miracle drug, right? We were able to eliminate a lot of infections. We didn't have as many issues as far as bacterial infections go. But, humans being humans, we went and we overdid it. And this seemed to cause disruptions in the gut flora, right? And as I've discussed before in previous episodes and in other forms of my content, your gut flora is very essential, right? 70% of your immune system is tied up in your gut. So every time you take an antibiotic, you disrupt and you imbalance your digestive system. All the good bacteria that causes all the good things to happen in your gut are now eliminated. They're no longer there because you've taken this substance, typically speaking, it's a fungi that goes in and it disrupts all the bacteria. So that also seemed to correlate with a rise in autoimmune diseases. Then a little bit later, so that would have been like the late 1940s. A little bit later in the 50s, that's when we first introduced our hybridized wheat. Okay, so we started crossbreeding our wheat. This is before GMOs. Okay, this is like the precursor for GMO food, and so we started getting wheat that was weather resistant and pest resistant, and we did this by hybridization. We would crossbreed these wheats to develop this. Well, strangely enough, again, once we started tinkering with nature, there was another spike in the rise of autoimmune diseases, and it didn't really. I mean, I guess there really wasn't enough, or maybe there was, and I just didn't care. There wasn't enough of a spike for anybody to go, maybe this isn't such a good idea for us to go and start messing around with how nature has made this wheat, and maybe we shouldn't have done that, but we did anyway because again, we're humans, and that's what humans do, and we went along that way. So after we got rid of the DDT, and we were still suffering from the after effects of that. Um, and of course, we're still using the antibiotics today, so that there's a leading consensus that we definitely overprescribe antibiotics, and that they have a detrimental effect on the body if used improperly. Obviously, they're very useful. They've saved millions of lives over the years, but there's the problem with you don't need an antibiotic every time. And if you take too much of it, eventually you'll get bacteria that are resistant to the antibiotics, and then you run into real problems because then you're like your MRSA, Staphylococcus, all of these tend to become over time antibiotic resistant, and then they have to develop new antibiotics that are stronger, and they cause even more problems. I mean, it's kind of a vicious circle. But yeah, that seems to be what we do, and it didn't stop there. I mean, later on, we in the 70s, after the 50s went around, in the 70s, that's when we introduced high fructose corn syrup, right? The dreaded HFS, right? HFCS. That stuff is awful for you. It's used as a sweetener because it was cheaper for them to use it to process the foods, right? But what they've noticed is that the more we eat, the more it leads to inflammation in the body, which is also shown to be a leading precursor for all diseases. And so we're deliberately feeding ourselves inflammatory foods, and there, again, in the 70s, there was another spike, there was another rise in autoimmune diseases, and how they are starting to become more prevalent in society. And so we decided, in our infinite wisdom, we'll just continue doing that. And again, this is one of those things that we still continue today. And we continue to do that, and more and more people are becoming aware that maybe we shouldn't be adding that to our food. And in some cases, some of the food companies are even taking a few minutes of their time to consider it. And you'll notice that some sodas or pops will have sugar in it versus the high fructose corn syrup. But realistically speaking, that much sugar in the body itself, regardless of whether it's in the form of high fructose corn syrup or whether it's in the form of sugar, is still going to lead to inflammation in the body, which is still going to lead to precursors for other diseases such as autoimmune disease. Now, also in the 70s was the introduction of one that I'm sure you guys are all very, very familiar with. That's when we introduced glyphosate, or otherwise known as Roundup. This is the stuff that we were spraying on our crops. They were using it in theory to prevent the weeds, but they also used it for another purpose. That's not the only reason why glyphosate is sprayed on our crops, and it's still used today, 40, 50 years later. They're still using this crap on our crops. Oftentimes, like with wheat, especially like where we get our bread, they will spray glyphosate on a crop about 2 weeks before they're getting ready to harvest the crop. And they're not doing it to kill weeds in that particular instance. In that particular instance, they're spraying the glyphosate on the crops to kill the crop off, so that way everything is dead at the same time, and then they can go through and they can harvest it, and then they're not getting stuff that's fresh, which causes mold and bacteria and other issues. So from their perspective, it's from a practical viewpoint. And I kind of think that Monsanto probably knew the dangers. They would have had to have done the studies, but if they can make millions and millions of dollars, and if people are using it, then obviously they're just going to continue to produce that, and it's gonna cause the problems that it seems to be leading to today. There have been some studies that show that that glyphosate can have a direct impact on your actual on a body genetically. For instance, I'm a firm believer that that a lot of people nowadays that have a quote unquote gluten intolerance aren't necessarily intolerant of gluten. It's not the gluten that's the problem. The problem is the glyphosate that's in the gluten, because we still use that stuff on our wheat crops and on our food crops in order to be able to process them in a more efficient manner. Because in this particular instance, efficiency is going to be more beneficial to us than the potential of an entire crop going bad because some of them are still fresh and they got moldy. It doesn't make any sense to me though. And then we jumped into the 90s, and this is when things got really, really fun. And I use fun in the loosest term possible. This is when we decided we'd already done it in the 80s, but we decided to use, it was a surge in the use of GMO type of food crops. So genetically modified crops now were being more used. Now, here's the thing about the GMO crops. What they did with those was they made them pest resistant, and they altered them on a genetic level, and they made them herbicide resistant. So, so they can't necessarily, so they built this tolerance up to herbicides, which meant that you actually had to use more glyphosate to get the benefits that you're trying to get from the glyphosate than you did before. Because now all of a sudden, these plants are developing an immunity to the glyphosate. So you have to use more glyphosate in order to be able to kill those crops off at the right time. So that way you can still be able to harvest. So, they noticed that in the 90s, again, in the medical field, they noticed that again, there was yet another spike in the rise in autoimmune diseases. And if you actually look at a graph on it, it's kind of crazy. It just, it just steadily goes up over the last 75 years. So 75 years we've had such a significant spike. There weren't millions of people that had autoimmune diseases back in the 1920s, and it wasn't due to a lack of diagnostics. It was due to a lack of, we didn't have a lot of crap in our food. There was a lot of things that we did that was considered societally easy, such as processed foods and inconvenience types of foods. And this has led to a distinct decrease in our health, right? I mean, there is a direct correlation. A lot of people don't want to discuss that, especially the people that are making money off of the type of industries that do this kind of stuff. So the 90s, you had the GMOs, and they can't directly link them to the autoimmune disease. I mean, they're trying to, but the companies that produce the GMO products, well, I mean, it doesn't really behoove them to be showing you all the studies, or if there are any studies that show that there could potentially be a negative impact on eating this food. We know that getting specific foods or specific things that are fed to our meat translates into our foods. So you get your antibiotics in the meat, you get your growth hormones in the meat, and this is showing an impact societally. So, you have kids that are going through puberty that are much earlier. We're having other types of issues with antibiotic resistance, because we're eating it all the time. It's in our food because that's what we give the animals to keep them healthy. And so, we're eating that stuff that's in their meat. Of course, it's going to metabolize on a molecular level. These types of chemicals and these types of products that we're giving our meat foods is going to translate directly into the meat. So in the 2000s, we came a little bit further on in the 2000s. Then that's when we really started getting really bad with like the pollutants. So you had exposure to environmental pollutants like your heavy metals and your industrial chemicals because we had factories and and I know we did that in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, but in the 2000s, there was starting to become more of a recognized link or a recognized correlation between these environmental toxins and the rise in autoimmune disease. And then in the most recent, like within the last 5 or 10 years, scientists are finding that it's our lifestyles, right? We have a sedentary lifestyle where we just kind of sit around on our phones. We don't really do much. We're not very motivated. And we have this amazing machine, our bodies. From my perspective, it's a biological machine, and we just sit with it. That's like having a muscle car and just leave it in your garage all the time and never drive it. It doesn't make any sense. So you have to kind of keep doing the same thing with your body, and they're finding that and of course we're eating all the processed foods and the junk foods and the snacks and all the crap that's bad for us. All of this stuff seems to be contributing to the rise of autoimmune diseases, but they're not sure, right? The scientists say, "Oh, we're not really sure what causes it." And then, of course, you have your genetics, because we still have those where the genetics is the issue. And those have to kind of be addressed a little bit differently. Diabetes 1, for instance, seems to be genetic. And you can, even the rheumatoid arthritis, it does seem to run in families. So maybe there's a specific gene that leads to that. But I mean, they're not really sure what leads to them. However, there does seem to be some correlations in the last 70 years. Every time we had some sort of quote unquote scientific advancement or something we did different to the environment, we had a rise or a spike in the rise of these diseases. From my perspective, I mean, what do you think? Don't you think there seems to be some sort of correlation between the two? Now, I know I mentioned before that there were over 80. I think there's like 84 autoimmune diseases in total. I'm going to name like the top 15, and you've probably heard of them. Most likely, you've heard of at least some of them. Now, I know I'll probably butcher some of these names. I mean, there's a couple of them that I'm unfamiliar with. I know some of the most common ones. So let's start. Rheumatoid arthritis. This is an autoimmune disease. It affects the joints. It causes pain, swelling, stiffness. It's very similar to arthritis, but this is where the immune system is directly involved. Then you have your type 1 diabetes, and that's where your uh, your immune system is actually attacking the 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 hormone, the insulin producing cells in your pancreas. Like the immune system is attacking that and preventing that process. You have your multiple sclerosis, which is nervous system. You have lupus and Hashimoto's. This is in the thyroid. Graves' disease. This one is, again, this is another thyroid. One causes the Hashimoto's is a hypothyroid, right, which means your thyroid doesn't function very well. And then you have your Graves' disease, which is hyperthyroid, which means that your thyroid is overactive, right? You have IBD or your inflammatory bowel diseases. So this is like your Crohn, ulcerative colitis, leaky gut, things like that. These are considered autoimmune diseases. You have celiac disease, right? So this is where you're having your gluten intolerances and your reactions to the gluten. And again, I'm still going to contend, even though it's just my own opinion, that it's the glyphosate that's causing the gluten intolerance, because these people can eat, like ancient grains, which don't have any gluten, and they have no problems with those. So I don't know. I'm not saying that they should. I'm just saying that for myself, I think that there's a connection there. You have psoriasis, right, and your psoriatic arthritis, which is like an irritation inside the joints themselves, which is kind of very, very not pleasant at all. Um, Sjogren's syndrome, and this one actually is strange enough. It gets into your eyes because the autoimmune diseases. The reason why there's so many of them is because they affect so many different parts of the body, right? So that's why they have to have, so many different kinds, because they don't attack just one part of the body. They're kind of indiscriminate, and they'll go just about anywhere. Ankylosing spondylitis. This one causes it's a spinal infection, and sorry about that. Alopecia, obviously, this is the one with where people they'll lose their hair, and it causes other issues, with just like complete baldness all over the entire body. Scleroderma, which is in regards to your skin and your other types of connective tissues, so your ligaments and your tendons. Uh, Myasthenia gravis weakens the connection between the nerve muscles. This one causes like muscle weakness, and your muscles aren't going to necessarily function nearly as well. And of course, there's autoimmune hepatitis. Now, this one goes directly to the liver. HEPA is the main name there. HEPA, hepatic system, your liver. Um, this one is inflammation. It's going to lead to inflammation. It's going to lead to liver damage, cause other types of issues. Now, you know, there's like 59 more of them or 69 more of them, and I'm not going to go through the complete list. And I would actually like to break down like six or seven, maybe five or six of them. I mean, and kind of go over what each one is, and some of the symptoms. And then, of course, we're going to go into some things that we can do, especially if you have an autoimmune disease. There's some things that we can do, some steps we can take. There's some supplements that we can implement into our daily lives that could help alleviate a lot of these symptoms. Part of the issue with the immune system is that it's overacting, right? It's overreacting to the body itself, and it's treating the body like it's an intruder, and we need to be able to modulate that response, and there's certain things that we can do that can help eliminate some of the causes. Not that it may necessarily eliminate the issue entirely, because realistically speaking, If it's genetic, it could be a lot harder to get to. But at the very least, then you could take that pharmaceutical approach of going ahead and taking care of the symptoms and seeing what else can be done that would help to alleviate that. If you're still with me on this, let's go through a few of the ones that I just mentioned, and I'm going to break them down a little bit. We'll talk about some of the symptoms and how they can affect the body. And this is kind of going to point out how different autoimmune disorders target specific parts of the body. That's why there's so many of them. Let's see. We'll start with rheumatoid arthritis. Okay. So, as far as like clinically what it is, it's a chronic inflammatory disorder targeting the joints, often leading to deformities. So, if you see people that have the fingers where they're bent and they can't move them and they're stiff, this is most commonly the the rheumatoid arthritis, and it is where your immune system is going haywire and they're attacking all those joints. Now when you have arthritis, it's usually bone spurs, and it leads to it cuts and it leads to inflammation and it's pretty painful. But when it comes to rheumatoid arthritis, it does the same thing, only the immune system's involved. So as those cuts and the damage is happening, the immune system is overreacting to that, and it's actually acting against the body itself, and it's excruciatingly painful. And when they say chronic, I mean it's constant, right? There's no relief from it. It's constant pain. Typically speaking, it's going to be in your fingers. In some cases, you'll find it maybe in your elbows or your knees or toes, but for the most part, it'll be fingers, and you'll usually see it in the very elderly, people that have had it all their lives. Like if it's genetic, then they've experienced it all their lives, and it gets only worse over time, the deformities. Some of the symptoms that they'll have, like in the mornings, they'll have stiffness that'll be more than 30 minutes, and this is also consistent with arthritis, which is why sometimes they have a problem differentiating between the two, right? Because the symptoms are very similar. The joints will be swollen and they'll be very tender, like if you touch them, they're going to be tender to the touch. But on top of that, it's going to affect your energy levels, right? Because your body is going overdrive, attacking that. It's taking energy and resources away from your body. So you're going to be tired. You're going to be fatigued. You're going to have a little bit, not very much energy all the time. And and I know, like most of us feel like that right now, right? Like I'm always tired, but that's just due to the fact that I have a job outside of this. I don't really make any money at this very much, other than my awesome patrons, who give me they pay me a little bit, and then that helps me with this. Excuse me. All right, so then you'll have you'll develop fevers, right? Because when your immune system is trying to get something out of the body, that it'll produce these types of antibodies, right? And oftentimes that leads to a fever. That's why you'll have a fever with a cold or a flu. This, and it's consistent. It'll stay fairly consistent as far as the fever goes. And then over time, you're going to lose the ability to have any mobility in those joints, right? You're not even going to be able to move them. They're just going to be like these useless appendages that just kind of sit out there, that are just constantly in pain. And the downside to this, if you don't treat it, if you just let it continue on, it doesn't stop at the joints. This is one of those weird ones, man. Eventually what it does is it'll get in and it will infect your heart and lungs. And I laugh because the absurdity of, oh my God, that sounds terrifying. It gets into, imagine that your immune system all of a sudden starts to attack your heart and lungs. So not only do your appendages hurt, now you're going to be having, more issues breathing. You're going to, more issues for heart attack or other type of cardiac disruption. So like, as if that one wasn't bad enough, the next one, we're going to discuss is common. You've probably heard of it. It's called lupus. The actual name or the clinical name for it is systemic lupus erythematosus, or SLE. And this is a systemic disease where the immune system attacks various organs, multiple organs, like all at once, right? It's not just going to attack that one spot. This one's more of a spread out. And of course, one of the organs that it'll affect in some cases will be your skin, right? Your biggest organ, your largest organ, which is your skin. And you'll notice, or one of the symptoms is like a butterfly-shaped rash, and it'll be typically like across your nose or on your cheek. It's a facial rash, and it's kind of shaped. It'll be shaped like a butterfly, and It'll be painful, it'll be itchy, irritating, right? That's the immune system attacking those particular areas. You're also going to experience, like with the rheumatoid arthritis, and this is where sometimes these symptoms will overlap and it can be kind of difficult to diagnose them. You're going to get joint pain and swelling. So, but that's where it makes it a little bit easier to identify the lupus, is because it's going to multiple things at the same time. Um, you're going to be tired all the time. Like, it doesn't matter how much you sleep, how much you rest, no matter what you do, you take a 2 week vacation and you have a desk job, but you work out and you're still always tired. This is chronic fatigue. This is like the literal definition of just being perpetually in that I'm exhausted state. You're going to be like real sensitive to sunlight. Like, you get outside, it hurts your eyes. You might sunburn faster. In some cases, people have like a sun allergy, where they'll have like a similar like an allergic reaction to just being in the sun. This can get into your kidneys, so it'll cause kidney inflammation, and which can make that mimic other types of issues, like kidney stones or other types of kidney disease. And they have to be very careful when they're trying to diagnose this, because it affects so many different parts of the body. It can be difficult to diagnose. Can you imagine being the doctor in charge of that? You're sitting there and someone goes, well, I got this rash on my cheek, but they've scratched it or whatever. Maybe it doesn't necessarily look like a butterfly anymore, or maybe it's spread, or whatever, right? Maybe it's not quite exactly like that. So, or maybe the doctor doesn't recognize it as that, right? Or maybe you don't even have that particular one, because it could be any of those things. And if you have, that again, that's why it's difficult to diagnose, because doctors aren't necessarily sure. And let's be real, patients aren't always very accurate in presenting their symptoms. In some cases, if you ever watched House on TV, patients lie. Well, that is the case. In some cases, patients lie, and or they'll forget, or maybe they missed the symptom themselves. Maybe they didn't see it as anything. Maybe they just felt, oh, I scratched that in my face. No, that was just me scratching. So, it's when it comes to diagnosing autoimmune disease, it's still very difficult, even today, right? So you can't say that, well, we didn't have the proper diagnosis back in the day, because we maybe did, but we were just having the exact same problems trying to figure out which symptoms match what, to be able to be definitive in our definition of what that one is. One of the more common ones I'm sure you've heard of is Hashimoto's, right? And if you don't know the actual name of this one, this is our next one we're going to discuss. This would be Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And this is obviously, if just in the title or in the name, you should be able to kind of at least halfway figure out what it's doing. This is an autoimmune condition that it targets the thyroid gland in particular, and it leads to hypothyroidism, not hyper, but hypo, Hypo, and which is a lack of production. So the thyroid isn't producing enough. It's not doing quite what it's supposed to, and you're going to have very similar symptoms to other types of symptoms in the other two, and symptoms for this is fatigue and sluggishness, right? You're going to be tired all the time. Again, no matter what you do to rest, you're going to be tired all the time. You'll gain a lot of weight really fast for no reason. Even if you work out or whatever, because some people will be tired, they'll still work out. They'll still get that extra energy, even if they have to do an energy booster, or they have to do other supplements to boost that function. And they can have this Hashimoto's and not even realize it. They're going to start losing their hair, so their hair is going to get thin. Even women, right? So it's going to be both. Your hair will get thinner, because this is going to be a lack of nutrients. You're not necessarily getting all the nutrients you need, which I also think is part of the fatigue, right? You're going to be real sensitive to cold temperatures. Like, you get outside, man, it's cold. No matter what. If you're normally used to 75 degrees and it gets 60, and you're all of a sudden you need a coat, you feel like going and getting your snowsuit, you're super sensitive to cold. And again, you don't have to have all of these symptoms for any of these. These are just the general symptoms that they find. And there's more in-depth checklists, right, so they can make more diagnoses. I'm sure there's other blood tests and other types of tests that they can do to help determine what it is. But if you're trying to figure out, what the heck's wrong, this is a good way to kind of figure out, That doesn't mean go to WebMD and do a quick search and go, oh, well, I fit 5 of these 6 symptoms, so that must be what I have. Well, as you can see with just these, it's a little bit more complicated than that. You have to genuinely understand everything. Um, then you have the other one. Now this one's been around forever. At least as far as I can. I did some search in history, and there's been discussion of this. As far as recorded history, at least as far as I can determine, and that would be your type 1 diabetes. And you have type 2 diabetes where you're having an issue. You have that insulin sensitivity, and you're having an issue producing enough. This is very similar, only it's the immune system doing it. It's attacking the pancreas, which is what produces insulin. So the immune system will actually get in and destroy these insulin producing cells in the pancreas, which is preventing the pancreas from producing the insulin. So these are beta cells that are, they have their own specific design, and that's the purpose that they serve is actually producing that insulin, and the immune system is preventing that, right? It's preventing the production of those beta cells, and therefore you can't actually produce the insulin, right? Terrible. It's awful. So they have symptoms of that, and again, this one's what makes it difficult to determine whether you have type 1 or type 2 is you're gonna have frequent urination. You're gonna pee a lot, right? And whether you're drinking a lot of water or not, you're gonna pee a lot. But you're gonna be thirsty all the time too. So and if you're thirsty all the time, maybe you're just dehydrated. I'm saying that somebody that doesn't necessarily know what the problem is. You're gonna lose weight constantly, but or really quick. If this develops, if this isn't genetic and it's something that's developed over time, you're like there's no real definite time when it happens when people get the type 1 diabetes. Again, this could be led to environmental factors. This could be led to other things, stress and lifestyles, things like that. But this is obviously the immune system, at least for the sake of type 1 diabetes. You're going to lose a lot of weight, but you're going to be hungry all the time, right? So no matter how much you eat, you're still losing weight, and you're like, but you're still tired too. So you eat all the time, you're irritable, you know, you're hungry all the time, but you still eat all the time, and you're peeing a lot, and you see what I'm saying? It's like it'll all happen like fairly quickly over a very quick period of time. Your vision will get blurry, and this is because you're not producing any insulin. It's not even necessarily an insulin resistance. You're just not producing it. And of course, if you don't have insulin in your body, your blood sugar levels have to spiral out of control, right? And then that's when you have your diabetic comas and other issues that are just awful. So this is something that if you find a way to balance the immune system, and we're going to get to that later, but it just seems like if you can find a way to do that, that could be very beneficial. Then you have your multiple sclerosis, and this is for a particular a follower who's been asking for something on multiple sclerosis for a long time, and I've been trying to get around to doing multiple sclerosis. This one's a very complicated one, and I would actually like to do like a specific episode or something at some point in the future on multiple sclerosis, and because this one's a big one. It's been around for a long time. It's this one kind of, the immune system goes after you. It's close to fibromyalgia. The symptoms are very similar, but this is like an autoimmune attack on your nervous system, and this gets your nerves that go through the body. They have these sheaths. It's a myelin sheath. It's the same thing that goes around your brain, right? Insulin is required for this, and our cholesterol is required to make your myelin sheath. It helps to produce the myelin, cholesterol in particular. So what this does is the immune system will go after that sheath as if it's an intruder, and if you remove that you're literally exposing your nerves to everything. That's like taking a power line or an extension cord and scraping away the wires, right? It's very similar to that. Now you have all this live energy, and it'll affect your body. You'll have pain, you'll have numbness and tingling in your limbs, so your extremities, your toes, your legs, they'll just get numb because now they're not covered with that myelin sheath. Your muscles are going to be weak. You're going to spasm. Not like Parkinson's, nothing like that, But by spasm, like the sudden jerk for no reason out of the blue, you just have your arm jerk, your shoulder jerk, whatever. You have vision problems, right? Because what is your eye? It has the optic nerve, over 6 million nerves in the optic nerve, and or maybe 3 million. I think it's 6 million. But if you get that, that's going to affect how you see, how you perceive. You're going to be obviously very tired, and myelin's very important in your brain. Especially if you've been watching social media lately and how they've been talking about the importance of cholesterol in strengthening the myelin in your body. Well, it doesn't just cover your brain; it covers your entire nervous system. And obviously, this is going to be lead to fatigue. You're going to have maybe some difficulty concentrating because that myelin sheath around your brain has now been affected. Your balance and maybe some coordination. Maybe you don't balance as well. You're kind of clumsy. You can't can't stand straight or just walk in a straight line without having some sort of issues. And it's progressive, right? Over time, if you don't find some way to address it, over time it just gets worse. You have to have that sheath. Imagine having, if your body's a biological machine, like I contend, well, your nervous system would be your extension cords going through the body, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, all your extension cords are frayed. And if your extension cord gets frayed, what's it do? It blows a circuit. Well, this is the same sim. That's how I visualize this kind of thing. So now you've just short circuited your nervous system, and over time it's going to get worse. So finally everything just shorts out. I mean, so that's another one that's been pretty prevalent. I'd say that's like maybe the fifth most common autoimmune disease that's currently being discussed or trying to be studied to get some real results. And then of course you have your next one, number six would be fibromyalgia. This one it hasn't always been considered an autoimmune disorder, but it's more of um, heightened pain sensitivity and immune disruption or immune dysfunction. The immune system doesn't quite work right. It doesn't always attack the body, but it doesn't always respond accordingly if you have those intruders that we discussed earlier in your body. This is going to be widespread muscle pain and tenderness. So this isn't going to be the nerves hurting. This is actually going to get into your muscles themselves. So your biceps, your deltoids, your legs, your hamstrings, various muscles and groups, and they'll hurt like the whole muscle will. You'll be tired again. You see how this can be confusing? You're going to be tired. All of these are going to cause extreme fatigue. You're not going to be able to sleep very well. It's going to be what they call non-restorative sleep. And as the name shows, non-restorative. You're not restoring. You're replenishing any type of anything when you are sleeping. Brain fog. You're not going to be able to remember, or concentrate, and you can see how this can be confused with MS. The symptoms are pretty similar. Headaches or migraines. And you could just assume, well, I'm just tired all the time because of the migraines, and not even think fibromyalgia. And this is one of those ones that it's progressive and it's going to disrupt your daily life. You're not going to every time. I mean, imagine having to go to work, and I'm sure you've seen people go to work and out of the blue just get a migraine, and maybe they don't know that's what it is. Um, it's so mind-boggling that your immune system can do this. This is your immune system. It's supposed to be protecting you, right? And it's definitely going out of its way. And fibromyalgia is so difficult to diagnose, right? And because there's no real clear diagnostic test for it. They have like a checklist, and even with advances in science that we have now, it's still very difficult to diagnose. And this is the same with pretty much any autoimmune disease. It's hard to diagnose. They're all going to share very similar symptoms. They're just going to affect different parts of the body. Like some of them will affect your eyes, or maybe just your toes or your bladder, your kidneys, or whatever. And at those point, it does make it a little bit easier to diagnose, right? But in some cases, it could still be misdiagnosed. Like maybe the one that's going after the liver could be confused with cirrhosis or something else, right? Liver failure, something like that. And so what can you do? I mean, if you have an autoimmune disease and you're like, well, that doesn't sound very promising, man. Yeah, here I am. I'm tired all the time. My immune system is thinks I'm its own enemy. What can I do about that? Well, I'm a big proponent of the 3Ds of health, and I'm going to be blah blah blahing that for probably ever. Fix detox, right? If you've listened to one of my previous podcasts, I discussed that. You got to detoxify your body, and you got to do the 3 detoxes, not just a single detox. And by detox, I don't mean just take activated charcoal and you're good. You got to detox. So the first detox I do is a full body detox. This is where I'm going to get my liver, my kidneys, my lymph systems, my spleen, my gallbladder, and get all of those functioning up at optimal levels. This is my filtration system, right? I want to make sure that's going properly. Then I'm going to fix my digestion, right? So fermented foods. Oh, well, the other detoxes. I'm going to do a heavy metal detox, right? So we're pulling any heavy metal toxins because if this is environmental, we clearly want to remove those. And activated charcoal, again, is not going to be the way. You're going to want to be taking herbs or supplements that help on that level that are shown to promote chelation. And this is where, they bind to heavy metals. They say heavy metals, but, depending on what you're using, they'll bind to toxins in general. So we're talking like spirulina, and this is a blue-green algae. This is a very nutrient-dense food source, but the compounds in it are also known to bind to heavy metals and other types of toxins, so this can help pull that out. Then you would do maybe chlorella or chaparral leaf. These also bind to heavy metals and toxins. I mean, they even bind to things like, fluoride and mercury and lead, right? They bind and then they'll pull them out of the body and you just remove them naturally. So, and then you fix your diet, right? So, or digestion, I guess. You do your fermented foods, make sure you're not eating processed food, sugars. Sugars are inflammation, and if you have an autoimmune disease, inflammation is pretty much the symptoms for all of it. So you want to reduce your inflammation. So you're gonna get rid of your starches like your rice and your bread, and your sweets. That's got to go. This is gonna help your body be able to adapt a little bit better. Then you're gonna stop eating processed foods, eating more natural foods. And your meats. I think the paleo diet is probably the best. I'm not recommending anything. I'm just saying that from a biological viewpoint, the human body seems to be okay with the paleo diet, which is meat, nuts, eggs, fruit, vegetables, and fish. That's it. No milk, none of that other stuff. Coffee, tea, things like that's okay. But again, no sugar, none of that other stuff. Just those things. And our body can metabolize that. If you start with those three, more and more growing consensus among the medical community is if you can fix those three, most of the time, most illnesses will go away because you've eliminated all the problems. If you look at the body as a biological machine, there's really only two things that can go wrong with it, barring physical injury. You either have a toxin introduced from the outside, right? And as we've discussed, toxins may have potentially led to all of this, or you have a lack of nutrients, right? Because your body needs a specific amount and a specific type of nutrients to function properly. Those are really the only two things that can go wrong, short of genetics and being injured. So, if we can fix those first three things, detox, digestion, and diet, a lot of the other stuff should be easier to address. And even if it doesn't get, you know, totally go away, if it's still there, at least you've started with those three steps, and now you've got your body at the baseline of where it's supposed to be, and then you can continue on from there. Okay. Now there are supplements that people take. There's herbs, there's plants, phytotherapy, plant-based therapy. There's a ton of science behind that, and you see a lot of natural and herbal supplements out there on the market. But if you have an autoimmune disease, you have to be very careful which supplement you're taking, because some of these supplements can lead to more problems. Okay, you have two different kinds of immune supporting herbs. These are going to be your immune boosters, and as the name implies, they boost immune function. They're going to make the immune system work better. Like echinacea is one of those herbs that will put your immune system into overdrive. This is like steroids for your immune system. So if you have an autoimmune disease, the last thing you want is your immune system to be boosted, right? It's already working at its optimum, or you're working really well, so well in fact that it's trying to unalive you. So you don't want to boost the function. And then you have your immunomodulators, and as the name implies, it will help to modulate the immune response. And in this particular instance, immunomodulators will balance what your immune system does. Now, does that mean that it's going to automatically, oh wow, now it's modulated it, so it's going to stop addressing the body as a threat? No, not necessarily. But At the very least, it will suppress a lot of the reactions of the immune system to help prevent there to be an overabundance of a response. So if you take the first step of removing the inflammation and the inflammatory stuff that you're eating and consuming, maybe find a way to get rid of the toxins in your environment or whatever that takes, and then you become more active, physically active. You got to get that body going, and then you do that um, to modulate. This should help alleviate a lot of the symptoms, and then you would have an easier time at that point, going forward in addressing the ultimate issue. Do I do I think that it's an ultimate solution? No, maybe not necessarily, but I think it's a great start, right? And I think that we should probably lead to do some more research towards helping to suppress a lot of that immune response. So now they do have pharmaceuticals that are immunosuppressants, right? They're not immunomodulators. They just plain old suppress the immune system, and that can be a problem, right? They use immunosuppressors when you have a transplant, so your body doesn't react to the transplant, and you have to stay on them forever. So that leaves you immunocompromised at that point. Because then, if you do get something from the outside, it makes it more difficult for your body to respond to that. So you can do some natural things that you can just add to your diet that will help to alleviate some of the inflammatory markers that are going to be helping to lead some of these symptoms. So you want to stay with your omega 3 fatty acids, right? And these are this is like your fish oil. And you can buy the supplements or you can just add, quality organic fish to your diet. Obviously, you don't want to eat too much fish, especially from the ocean, with the overexposure to mercury and stuff. But you can add it to your diet. Do some research to see which one works best for you. But these are essential. Not only are the omega 3s good for your heart health, but they can also help to alleviate a lot of that inflammation, right? Keep that inflammation down. You want to get vitamin D because this is going to help regulate your immune function. This is going to by regulating, it's going to kind of rein it in and say, whoa, whoa, whoa. How about we not attack the people who live here? How about we just go after the intruders? So it kind of helps to balance it out. And vitamin D also helps to reduce inflammation. More and more and more science is showing that if we can reduce the inflammation and a lot of the inflammatory markers, which is typically our diets that lead to a lot of that, we could really put a dent in a lot of chronic illness, especially autoimmune diseases. Then of course you got to do your probiotics. Now you can go to your doctor and you can do probiotics, and in some cases, I call them poop pills because in some cases they have it's been quote unquote cleaned, but it is what it sounds like. It's feces that's been processed, and you get to take that little pill. They have other ways of doing it where they can like directly put it in your gut, but no, I'm good, man. There's other ways to go about there's other ways to go about doing that naturally without having to resort to something quite as drastic as that. Now, I guess in some cases people just can't and they need that jump start, but I think I'm good. I think I'm really good. But probiotics, right? And this is going to be your fermented foods. They're very easy. You can make it yourself. Cabbage is literally just salt and cabbage, or sauerkraut. Salt and cabbage. That's it. Only two ingredients. And once it's fermented, you eat it raw. You can't cook it. Once you've cooked it, you've killed off that bacteria. But once it's fermented, it creates a probiotic bacteria that gets into your gut. The cabbage itself is a prebiotic, so it breaks down very easily in your digestive system. And then, of course, the fermentation, which is all the bacteria that's in it, will help to replenish your gut, right? Now, you really have to fix your gut, especially with an autoimmune disease, because if your immune system is off in this manner, you got to fix it. Well, and you may be asking, well, why would I want to fix my digestion? It's because 70% of your immune system is your digestive system. 70% of your immune response comes out of your gut. And if your gut's out of whack, well, what do you think that says? That means your immune system's going to be out of whack. So you got to fix that gut too, right? And feeding it fermented foods. You got kefir, you got kombucha, you have the Greek yogurt that's unprocessed, right? I can't remember exactly what it's called. And it'll come to me right after I'm done with this, I'm sure. But apple cider vinegar with a mother, all of these are fermented type foods. Even some wines, the red wines in particular will have some of that bacteria, but it also has alcohol, right? And that's kind of detrimental to bacteria. So you gotta kind of face that one with moderation. But there are some herbs that you can use that can help to alleviate some of these symptoms, especially if you're having an overactive immune system like an autoimmune disease. There's some herbs that you can add. You can either add it to your diet, you can take them in tincture form, which is usually an alcohol extract, right? You hold it under your tongue. That way you're getting it through your bloodstream fairly quickly. You're getting a quicker response. Or you can take the alcohol extract, and by alcohol extract, that doesn't mean you're taking a shot. You know, you're taking 5 to 10 drops of this alcohol based extract, and that's going to be your dose. And or you can do capsules. You know, in some cases, some of these herbs, you really the best way to use them would be to use them as an alcohol tincture, because that's going to be the best way to remove those compounds, because that's what you're trying to get out of the herbs. Okay, to get the best response out of it. So there's at least two of these that I'm going to say that you would definitely want to use a stronger alcohol tincture. You're going to want to use like 150 proof to make a tincture out of it, to get the best result out of the herb. And the first one's going to be turmeric, right? This is a great immunomodulating herb. It helps to reduce inflammation, right? This will help protect your tissues. So because it is a pain reliever as well. You got to make sure that you're taking it with either the piperine, black pepper, or capsaicin, cayenne, because the piperine is better. Capsaicin will still release those compounds from the turmeric. This is one of those ones you got to make sure to use the alcohol. It's got to have a high content of alcohol to get the best results out of it. Would be like a 60 to 70% alcohol. So you just use the 151, right? And make sure you have the black pepper. Make sure you have the cayenne in there, and that's going to help break that down and get that curcumin out of there. And that's going to lead to that immunomodulating. That's going to lead to that anti-inflammatory markers, right? It's going to help to reduce those symptoms. And turmeric, you can find it anywhere. Now, the downside to taking it as an extract like that is it has the potential to stain. So you don't want to put it directly on your teeth too many times, because eventually your teeth will turn like bright yellow, because it'll stain. You got to be kind of careful with it, but just keep it under your tongue. Ashwagandha, I'm not. There are some people that say that ashwagandha is an immunomodulator, and I've seen some studies, but I've seen other studies that show it as an immune booster. So I do have one of my followers who, even though they have MS, they use ashwagandha, and it seems to that they can use ashwagandha to good effect. However, I've talked to other people who, and maybe it depends on the autoimmune disease, because I've talked to other people who have had issues using ashwagandha, and it sent their immune system into overdrive, and it caused even more issues. So, maybe for MS and some of the others, I don't know. That one would be one. I think if you have an autoimmune disorder, you'd really want to do some research to ensure that it's the right one for you. Because I've seen studies that say both. There's some people that swear by it, and the one that I'm actually doing this particular episode for, I did this particular episode specifically for her. Um, I know she uses ashwagandha, but I'm not necessarily a huge fan. But that's just me, right? And some of the studies that I've seen more studies that say it don't than the studies that I show that it do. But I've heard anecdotally from people that it works well for theirs. So you'd have to take that one with a grain of salt. You have reishi mushrooms. Now this one isn't an herb; it's obviously a fungi, but reishi is really pretty incredible. It is immunomodulating. This one kind of helps it is almost an immunosuppressant. It's not, right, because if your immune system needs to come online for something, it will, but it suppresses that response that's attacking whatever issue. And from all the studies that I've read, it didn't seem to matter exactly which one or which autoimmune disease that they were having an impact on, right? It just seemed to kind of help. And this one's, again, pretty easy to add to the diet. You can, if you like mushrooms, you can add it to your food. You can make them into capsules. You can, I don't know, however it works the best for you. It's obviously going to be dependent on the person. You have stinging nettle. Yes, stinging nettle. Like if you walk out in the field and it stings the snot out of you, and you have an allergic reaction to the formic acid in the stinging nettle. Yeah, that stinging nettle. Well, the cool thing about that one is it is an immunomodulator, and it does the same thing. This works well for like allergies, and I know that allergies aren't an autoimmune disease per se, but the immune system acts in a very similar manner. It overreacts to an outside stimulus. Okay, so once it's dried, and it has to be dry. Once it's dried, and at that point you can turn it into soup. I guess some people actually pick it raw and then put it and make it directly into soup. You have nettle soup. You can make it into capsules, extracts, whatever works. But it definitely has an immune system inhibiting effect, and it has antimicrobial properties too. So even if you did have a cold or a flu, and your body was kind of fighting a bit, um, it would help to fight off the cold just because of inherently the properties that are in it. You have licorice root. You know the problem with licorice root. This one, this one like affects the adrenal support, right? So this is going to help to give you a little bit more energy. It helps to reduce a lot of the inflammation. The downside to licorice root is it's loaded with phytoestrogens, right? It's one of the higher ones, like after hops and some of those others. So, too much of it if you're a male isn't necessarily good, because those phytoestrogens are going to absorb into your body very similarly to estrogen. Your body's going to react the same way. At least, at the very least, it can't tell the difference. So it's going to be metabolized the same way. Um, you have cat's claw. This is a South American herb. It's very effective, but this one enhances the way your body regulates the immune system. So this is kind of like a security system for the security system, if you really want to look at it that way. This one will help to kind of tell the security system, whoa, 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 slow down, man. We're not going after these guys. How about we just kind of tone it down a bit? Let's go play a game or something. But let's not attack the hosts. And that one's pretty effective too. And I would say that depending on the autoimmune disease, these would probably work better in a blend rather than just using a single herb. And no, not all 10, right? But you'd have to pick and choose depending on your disease. And maybe at some point, if you guys want to see something like that, maybe we can go over some various recipes and how they would work to affect autoimmune disease. Let me know. Say something in the comments. This is another one of the next one's going to be another one of those ones that you definitely want to make sure you have that alcohol, that high alcohol content. You're going to need 60 or 70% alcohol to break it down the way you want. This is going to be frankincense, like frankincense and myrrh. Frankincense is specifically would work best for like the lupus and the rheumatoid arthritis, because this one will actually reduce the inflammation specifically in the joints. This will help to make the joints not so tender, and if you can reduce that inflammation, the immune response is going to be lessened, right? Because it's the inflammation that's causing the immune over response. So by reducing that inflammation, you're going to reduce the immune response to the inflammation, if that makes any sense. You can add aloe vera, right? Because this is good for the gut. It's loaded with enzymes and other prebiotics and probiotics just naturally, and some of these enzymes will, it's highly antimicrobial. So for like Crohn's and IBS and leaky gut and things like that, colitis, it's going to get in there and it's going to eliminate all that bad bacteria, right? It's going to get that bacteria out of there, and it's going to replenish a lot of the key enzymes that you need in your gut, which is obviously going to boost your immune response, and by regulating your digestion, you're helping to regulate your immune system. This kind of should be resonating and making sense at this point, right? All of this stuff kind of ties together. Our body's like this big intricate puzzle, and we got to put all the pieces in together. So aloe vera, you can, you got to make sure to stay away from. There's like this latex layer in the middle, so it's the gel, and it tastes awful. But you can get the gel. You can drink the gel. You can drink the juice, and it's a simple way. You wouldn't want to add a lot right away. I've had people. There was somebody that had diverticulosis, and we talked about aloe vera, and I didn't make any recommendations, but they did some research. They started with a tablespoon a day for about a week, and at this point, as far as I know, they're up to like a quarter cup a day. That's all they take in the morning. Quarter cup helps them to go stay regular, right? You don't want to leave all that stuff in your body. You need to be going regularly every day. In some cases, a couple times a day if you really have to. Um, but yeah, aloe vera, and it also helps to promote healing. So if you have damage that your immune system is attacking, the aloe vera itself will help to promote the healing process, which will again reduce the inflammation and again will reduce the autoimmune response. Um, there are some people that say echinacea, but I would advise against echinacea, and I'm not advising. I guess I would say for myself, if I had an autoimmune disease, I wouldn't do echinacea. echinacea it definitely puts your immune system on steroids, as far as I'm concerned. This will put your immune system into overdrive. And I see people that will take like echinacea every day, and it's like, "Ah, man, don't do that. 'Cause if you're taking it every single day, what you're doing is your immune system will eventually just go, I don't want to do this anymore. You know, I've got this echinacea every day. I don't need to do this. I don't need to function at my optimal. And if you're taking echinacea every day, especially if you have an autoimmune disease, well, your T cell production is going to go up. Your mast cells are going to go up. These things are going to lead to even more severe reactions of your immune system. So I would definitely avoid echinacea if I had an autoimmune disease. But I would probably, the next herb that you could do would be something like eyebright. Eyebright is another immunomod. Well, this one's borderline immunosuppressant. It's not, but it can be kind of. It's a vasodilator. It's really great for the eyes, but it seems to also have it'll reduce your mast cell production. The mast cells are responsible for your allergic reaction. These are immune response cells that cause like the inflammation and the puffiness and all that stuff. So this actually inhibits that production. And eyebright's found, all these herbs. You can find them all over online, right? You don't have to go pick them in your backyard. You can literally go find them online. It's not really practical to go out and harvest all these herbs, especially if you live in the city. How are you going to do that, right? It just makes sense just to buy it dried. And if you don't want to buy it by a pound, there's plenty of options for you to be able to buy them, online. Like I have a small Etsy store that I sell some bulk herbs and tinctures and capsules and stuff. But you can find, other Etsy stores. You can go to eBay. You can go to some of the big suppliers if you really want to buy it by the pound. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. They just take you a while to use up a pound if you're just a normal person. Um, but yeah, you can do that. Another one of the herbs, again, the last one we're going to talk about today anyway, because it kind of looks like I'm overlapping my time that I was expecting, would be ginger. And again, this one's easy to add. You would need more than maybe a tablespoon a day. If you think about, if you look at a normal capsule, a tablespoon is about 4 to 6 capsules. You know what I mean? So you would need to add much more than that. Now, me personally, I don't like the taste of ginger unless it's in my pumpkin pie. It's about the only place I feel my ginger belongs. But ginger is another one of those. It'll reduce inflammation. It'll help boost your digestive function. It's highly antimicrobial, so it's antibacterial. It's antifungal, so it gets into your digestive system. And the gingerol that's in there, that's the compound, gingerol, that gets in there, it'll disrupt that bad bacteria that's causing the issues in your digestive system. And again, ties right back to that 70% of our immune system, blah, blah, blah. So, these are the types of things that we can add. And obviously, there's a lot more. There's tons of other herbs out there that are immunomodulators. Elderberry is another good immunomodulator. This one's not an immune booster. And it has antibacterial, antiviral properties. So that's just my perspective. What do you guys think? I mean, if you have an autoimmune disorder, or if you've been listening to this throughout if you were able to last this long, what do you think? I mean, do you think that if you can balance those first three, that we could help to prevent a lot of the other issues? I don't know. I think so. It seems to be a natural approach would be the best way, rather than trying to fill your body with chemicals, especially if you have the autoimmune disease because of toxins, right? Now you want to add a bunch of chemicals too. I don't know. It doesn't work for me. But that's what I think. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this particular episode. Here in a second, we're going to talk about what we're going to come up with next. I think you're going to be pretty excited. I have confirmation now, and I think you'll like it. This one, we're not going to be talking about herbs or anything. So, So what do you think it's going to be? Well, I talked with my friend. Her name is Erica, and we are going to be doing episode 5, and we're going to be discussing big pharma. and and when I first asked her, initially she was very skeptical, and she's not necessarily sure how this is going to go. But we're going to be discussing the pharmaceutical industry, some of the newer things that they're doing. I want to cover some of the history of the pharmaceutical industry. If you are interested at all in how that whole process works, I am going to cover it all. I think you'll be surprised at how old that particular industry is, and in my opinion, how I think that it's helped to shape society and the way everybody does everything nowadays. So stay tuned for episode 5. We'll talk about Big Pharma. That'll be next Friday, 6 p.m. I apologize. This one got done late. had so much stuff with the holiday and family and all that stuff. So I apologize that I got this one done late. Hopefully it met your guys' expectations, and we'll see if we can make the next one even better. Should be fun. You guys will love Erica.